I hereby call the May 20th, 2015 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals to order.
I move that Harvey Welch be acting chairman for tonight's meeting.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed by the same? The motion carries. Please have a roll call.
Mr. Armstrong is excused this evening. Ms. Chester.
Here.
Ms. McLaughlin is excused this evening. Ms. Uckman.
Here.
Mr. Warmbrun.
Here.
Mr. Welch.
Here, I believe we have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right, hearing none, at this time I will swear in anybody who wishes to testify. Please stand and raise your hands. No one? Yeah, anybody wishes to testify has to stand and raise their hands. I'm sorry. Do you hereby swear or affirm that any testimony you give tonight to this board will be true and accurate to the best of your belief?
I do.
I believe your minutes of the prior meeting, the April 15th meeting, were included. Are there any changes to those minutes?
I saw a typo.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Page 2, on the very last line, it says used, and if they are, it says over.
Ms. Chester, I'm sorry, could you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Very last line, it says used, and if they are, it says over occupied, and I think it's supposed to say owner occupied.
We'll confirm with the tape. Thank you for pointing that out.
All right. Are there any other changes to the minutes?
Maybe not.
Then we'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move the minutes be approved as written.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Again, all in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? The minutes have been approved. Are there any written communications? No? No. All right. Yeah, I think that goes with the thing. I think that's written communications. I think outside of that, I think that goes with that. So we just call these hearings in the order they're listed on the minutes.
Yes, I will say that you may want to consider combining a few of the items, consider them together, so that would require a motion. And the first item, number 5, staff is asking that that case be continued at the request of the applicant.
So you're indicating that the applicant for ZBA 2015 C-02 has asked that that hearing be continued?
That's correct.
All right. Can we have a motion to that effect, please?
I move that CBA case 2015-C-02 be continued at the June 17th, 2015 regular.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
It's been moved and
What was that?
To continue.
continue this here on the agenda. Continue the first hearing.
Oh.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed by the same? That motion carries. Then that particular case then is continued to June 17th. And is there any other procedural matters you want to address?
I would like to point out that since our actual secretary is not here today, that Max is just sitting in, I would urge you to please be sure your microphone is on and that you're speaking into the microphone because Terry will be taking minutes from the audio, and we would really like to capture all of the audio to do that. Thank you.
And did you indicate that some of the remaining hearings can be combined, or is that what you were referring to?
Yes, when you get to that item, or you could do it now, I suppose, you may want to consider combining the items and considering them together as we will be presenting them together.
But not this first one.
No,
Okay.
that's a separate one.
All right, then I call for hearing ZBA 20,015-C-04. May we have a report from the city? 03, I'm sorry.
I was about to say. Okay, this is a request by Eric Herzog for a conditional use permit to allow an automobile repair and detailing facility on 509 East Main Street in the B4 Central Zoning District. So the subject property is located on the edge of downtown. It's zoned B4, which is central business, or the downtown area. And it's a request to allow it to be used as a facility for detailing automobiles. That includes washing, waxing, cleaning, minor repairs. It will not include oil changes or any repairs, everything that. It's mainly a request to allow a conditional use permit to detail cars, which is complementary to the applicant's other business located on North Cunningham, farther away. But just to briefly mention that it's surrounded by residential facility and residential properties to the east because it's the eastern edge of downtown, and then other B3 and B4 properties to the west. Just quickly glance to the zoning map as well. Future land use, it is zoned as central business. Currently, the property is used for storage of automobiles. It is owned on, the property is currently owned by Long's Garage, which is just to the west of the building and property in question. Long's Garage also does automobile repair. So the business would operate during normal daytime hours. It would not have a large volume of traffic of customers per se. Most of the movement would be internally between the business on North Cunningham and the facility itself. Most of it is in-house moving. There might be, according to the applicant, perhaps 2 or 3 customers a day that would be shown cars for use at sales that are off premise of the site. The applicant would undertake minor repairs, including cleaning and fixing some of the interior of the building just to make it more presentable. They made some repairs to the existing signage as well, which did not need to be permitted or did not need a permit. And they expect a fresh coat of gravel in the back to make some cosmetic improvements and make the building hospitable to a general business, but no major structural or physical changes to the site. The application is for a conditional use permit, as that is a use that is allowed or for automobile truck repair in tables 5.1 in the Urbana zoning ordinance. That's allowed with a conditional use permit. So just to briefly mention some of the goals and objectives that this case relates to from the comprehensive plan, minimizing incompatible land uses, as well as developing a diversified and broad stable tax base. So going to the criteria for conditional use permit, is the proposed use conducive to the public convenience at that location? It assists a local business, as well as it allows a nearby business a complementary use. Even though Long's Garage is a separate entity, the applicant talked about having a positive business relationship that would allow auto detailing to complement what Long's Garage operation. Obviously, they'll be leasing the space, so it'll be a more of a cooperative relationship. It's very similar to that of the existing auto repair nearby. Is the proposed use designed, located, and proposed to be operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located or otherwise injurious to the public welfare? Granting a conditional use permit entails automobiling, detailing repairs is very similar to the current use of automobile storage and of the past use for the property for that matter. There'd be little physical change or adjustment to the site, as previously mentioned. There would not be operating hours or much traffic that would heavily affect the site from what currently exists. Is the proposed use conforms to the applicable regulations and standards of and preserves the essential character of the district in which it shall be located, except where such regulations and standards are modified by section 7.3. And the description in the zoning ordinance describes the B4 district to provide an area for focus of the city in which the full range of commercial and business uses may locate in a limited area of high-intensity uses with the appropriate forms of physical development at a high density. And it allows for the continued use of a nearby business as well as one located outside the district. But basically, it allows a property that is somewhat dormant, just used for storage, to be more actively used without detriment and to a benefit to the surrounding area because of being a servicing business. So with that said, the staff concludes that the case should be, gives a recommendation to grant the proposed conditional use for case ZBA 2015 C04 with the following conditions: that there are no vehicular sales performed on the premise of the subject property, and that the development shall meet all applicable standards and regulations of the Urbana zoning ordinance. So, any questions?
I'd just like to point out that on page 5 there, where the staff recommendation is, the case referenced in the recommendation is CBA 2015 C04, and this is 03, so we'll change that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you have a question? Go ahead.
The map that you sent us
Mhm.
on Exhibit A,
Was the subject property not highlighted appropriately?
that's the wrong one.
Well, on the tax parcels, they show up, it's considered the same property as 503. It's on the northeast corner of the highlighted parcel on the monitor.
Isn't it on Grove in Maine, not Maple?
That
Yeah.
might be correct, actually.
Yeah, it's been a while looking.
Okay.
Yeah. Because on C, you've got the right one.
Okay.
I stand corrected.
I have a question.
Yes.
What do you mean exactly by the condition no sales take place?
Auto sales aren't allowed in the B4 district, so there will be cars that will be detailed and prepared for sales, but no physical sales, no display of price tags on the windshields, no volume of customers with sales transactions taking place on the premise are to be permitted.
No overtly.
Well-
signs. It just seems somewhat hard to, but that's fine.
The applicant explained that there is a lack of space on their current property to have a detailing, establish an in-house detailing operation for their current business, and this would allow them to establish one without putting in a great amount of infrastructure, and it also allows them to establish a complementary relationship with Long's Garage for business purposes.
But it could also just be a storage lot for cars that are for sale, as opposed to cars that come in the morning for detailing and leave in the afternoon. So we could have the lot, technically, if they're allowed to store cars there, that they might sell.
If the cars might be put up for sale at some point, but as long as we are not seeing price tags, as long as we're not seeing hearing about or seeing transactions being performed on the site, as long as we don't see if we see a large boost in the volume of customers on the site, or if we receive any complaints, it would be something we'd investigate. If we established a use violation, then we would undergo the appropriate procedures for such, but they might be used for storage, but there are certain things that would not be allowed that would that normally occur with sites that are used for auto sales, so such as the price tags on the windows or advertisements or signage relating to such.
Yeah, go ahead.
There appears to be a lot of gravel around here. Is this business required to have a setback with grass on either side of the property?
I don't believe that their setback requires if it's pavement or versus gravel versus a lawn per se. I know that they're allowed to maintain their existing lot because of it's probably been gravel for quite a long time, and it's most likely a legal nonconformity in that regard.
Any further questions for staff? Thank you.
I don't know if a representative from the applicant is here. I've been in conversations.
I was just going to ask, was the applicant or anyone who wanted to speak in favor of the application
He had
present?
said he was going to send someone from his as representation, but it appears not.
Appears not. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak against the proposed application? All right. Hearing none, is there any further discussion amongst the board? Are we ready to call this for a motion?
I'll move that we grant the proposed conditional use in case ZBA 2015 C-03 for the reasons articulated in the presentation, with the following conditions of number one, there are no vehicular sales performed in the premise of the subject property. Number two, that the development shall meet all applicable standards and regulations of the Urbana zoning ordinance.
Do we have a second for that?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Can we call for a vote on the motion?
Sorry, I was unaware that it's one of my jobs. Then I call for a motion on ZBA case 2015 number 03 with the conditions as listed. Ms. Chester,
Yes.
Ms. McLaughlin, sorry, Ms. Uckman. Ms. Uckman.
Oh,
Utman.
yes.
Mr. Warmbrun,
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes. That motion carries unanimously. We now move on to the next case. We call for hearing ZBA 2015-C-04. We have a report by staff.
Okay, the following is a request by Thomas Sheehan for a conditional use permit to allow a craft brewery and tasting room in an existing building at 208 West Griggs Street in the B4 Central Business Zoning District. It's a 0.4 acre lot at 208 West Griggs, in which the applicant would like to establish a craft brewery with a tasting room in the front that's available to the public. Craft brewery is not a use that's listed in the table of uses in Article 5. It's a rather new use for a lot of municipalities around the country. So the zoning administrator is to designate a most similar use for that, and for that that would closely represents the use of food product manufacturing and packaging would be confectionery products and manufacturing, confectionery products manufacturing and packing use, which is allowed in the B4 district with a conditional use permit. So just to briefly show the subject property, it's located right next to the Boneyard Creek in what's kind of the northern part of downtown. It's in a building that was long used for manufacturing. It's currently used for storage. It's zoned B4. Most of the neighboring parcels are zoned B4 as well. To the west and to the south, there are some residential uses, apartments. To the south, it's zoned R5, medium high density, multiple family. And to the west, it's zoned B3, but they contain apartments as well. So the applicant, currently this building is the site of a Mexican grocery store. I'm African, my apologies. That is established in the western part of the building. Towards the eastern part is where the applicant would be leasing from the property owner. They would like to establish a brewery and tasting room with a public entrance on the east side of the building, basically towards that side facing the Boneyard. They would install some windows as displayed in the current rendering. Was not included in the packet because I only got a hold of these this weekend, but you'll see where the windows are included as well as the front door entrance. So the applicant would like to establish a craft brewery and manufacturing of their own beer. They see this as a kind of a desired commodity in the area, or a lack of a business with a lack of, I think, fulfillment for the market in the Champaign-Urbana area. They would like to start brewing their own beer with a kegging operation at that site to distribute to local restaurants and taverns and bars. They will also feature a tasting room towards the front, which would allow for sampling to the general public, as well as the ability to take home beer in sealed growlers if they would like to as well. Want to mention that this will be is emphasized as being a tasting room, not a brew pub per se, or a tavern or a bar. They will only be serving their own product, because there are stipulations in state and federal liquor code as to what they can and can't serve on the premise where the product is manufactured. But just want to show a brief layout of what the floor plan would, the applicant is considering. About an equal split of 4,200 square feet in the back for the brewing process, and in the front for the public capacity. If there's one public entrance, there's about a cap of about 50 people or so. If they had another entrance, the allowable capacity could be increased. But The general hours that the applicants are considering are from, for at least for the public, are from 4 in the afternoon until 10:30 in the evening, perhaps 11 or 11:30 on Friday or Saturday evenings during the weekend. They have no plans to, they have not asked to install a full-service kitchen, so there will be no major food service on the premise either. So as previously mentioned, this would require a conditional use permit, not for the allowance of a tasting room per se. That's not under consideration because that is allowed by right in the B4 area, in the B4 district. But for the ability to manufacture beer on the premise is what is being considered for the conditional use permit. Also, I should mention that their applicant's plan is for around 300 barrels within the first year, with incremental increases in their volume based on market demand and their ability to expand financially as well. It's also worth mentioning that as far as water usage for the site, that if they use more than 1,500 gallons per day, that requires permitting by the Champaign-Urbana Sanitary District, and that's appropriately regulated as well with the appropriate body. This relates to several plans and goals in the comprehensive plan to increase the vitality of downtown Urbana as identified in the Downtown Strategic Plan and Annual Action Plan. The goal to develop a diversified and broad, stable tax base, and to preserve the characteristics that make Urbana unique in providing an establishment that is a unique amenity for the downtown area to complement existing restaurants, bars, and shops that are within a walking vicinity of that area as well. So to go through the requirements for a conditional use permit for this site, the proposed use is conducive to the public convenience at the location. It's a unique business in a building that's somewhat historical to the downtown area. The building has been around for decades, creates jobs and an increased tax base for the parcel. It's a pedestrian accessible amenity as emphasized in the city's downtown plan, and it is complementary to the park area to the east as well as to some of the other businesses to the south. And the building is not undergoing massive physical change, so it's easily adapted as well. The proposed use is designated, located, and proposed to be operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located or otherwise inferior to the public welfare. It's worth mentioning that the proposed use is already heavily regulated by federal and state law, as well as municipal code. Just for the local liquor code, they still would be required to achieve a liquor license through the appropriate process for the tasting room portion, although that's not what's under consideration for this application. It's the ability to, the proposed use that needs a conditional use permit is the manufacturing of beer. Most of the byproducts from beer production are non-hazardous. It's water vapor and heat, which is not unlike nearby restaurants or other establishments. And the B4 district does not have any parking requirements for businesses located there. That said, though, there is still available parking to the north and behind the building should the applicant or the property owner decide to make that available. That the proposed use conforms to the applicable regulations and standards of and preserves the essential character of the district in which it shall be located, except for where such regulations and standards are modified by Section 7.3. The description of the B4 district in the zoning ordinance is to provide an area for the focus of the city in which the full range of commercial and business uses may locate in a limited area of high-intensity uses with the appropriate forms of physical development at a high density. It allows for an adaptive reuse of an existing building Close proximity of production, along with its retail uses, are consistent with the high density that the city has consistently sought for the B4 district. It also conforms to existing regulations that allow on-premise alcohol consumption and retail liquor sales. It's complementary to the area's existing amenities, and the confectionery products manufacturing and packaging use is the most appropriate in terms of combination of ingredients and the product that is the output, with the only difference being that of an alcoholic substance. But with the findings of the staff that it does meet the criteria, or that it, with the questions asked for the conditional use permit, the board may grant the use, they may deny it, or they may grant it with additional conditions and requirements as well. The staff has a recommendation to grant the proposed conditional use permit with the following conditions: that the use must conform to all applicable zoning and building codes, and that the use conform to all applicable regulations in the Illinois Liquor Control Commission. So, if there were any questions.
Any questions for staff? No? I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned, I think, at the beginning of your presentation that microbreweries, there's no provision. I didn't recall what you said. No provision where?
In the table of uses, which defines, restaurants, auto sales or whatever, which has dozens of listed uses, a specific use of craft brewery in which alcohol is served, but it's also manufactured on, or it's also produced on the premise. There is not really a use that matches that. Restaurant or tavern would not be appropriate, but
Okay.
food manufacturing itself would. So, in the sense, if you treated it kind of like a bakery, in which there are products assembled for sale and for retail, but an area where people were allowed to buy products as well, or to taste or sample, and that's why confectionery products came up as why our zoning administrator determined it as the most similar use.
Then this is a comment as probably as well as a question. Then shouldn't, not for this case, but shouldn't in the future this issue be
Yes.
addressed somewhere else? Because we normally deal with things like parking or building structures too close to the sidewalks, and then, but now deciding which businesses, it's not really an appeal, so to speak, for a difference in seems to be a hole in the regulations that should be fixed somewhere else.
Well, there will always be unique uses that sometimes that are only emerged recently, like the issue of gaming halls.
I agree.
And it
But
is
I don't-
something that internally is being worked on with staff for presentation later this summer, most likely.
Thank you.
So,
Yes, go ahead.
Does this require a liquor license?
for the tasting room portion, yes. Which the applicant has plans to go through with the appropriate process for that. They are simply seeking the conditional use permit first. The applicant is also the applicant and his partners are also here tonight.
Are there any further questions for staff?
I just have one. Is there free parking to the north on what you call an alley?
The parking, I believe, is metered.
All of that is metered. I see some meters, yes.
I think it's all metered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Is the applicant or any person that would like to speak in favor of the conditional use permit application present? Please come forward. You have to sign. You've already been sworn in, but you have to sign in.
Okay. Okay.
Please state your name for the record.
Thomas Sheehan.
You are.
I'm the person that wants to put the brewery in.
Go ahead.
Do you have any questions for me specifically?
Do you have any, I guess I'd first give you an opportunity to make any
Okay.
statement you'd like to make.
Well, the reason why we discussed and picked confectionery, basically a brewery is you take grain, you steep it, you pull the sugars off, you cook the sugars, you put the sugar mixture into a tank, put some yeast in that, and then you have beer about 2 weeks later. We'll keg it. We'll serve a small portion of it in the brewery itself, and then eventually, as we gain sales throughout the local area and beyond, we'll sell it to bars and restaurants. That's about all I got.
Are there any questions for the petitioner? No? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the application? Please step forward.
Let's see here.
Good evening. My name's Brian Adams. I live in Champaign right now, at 907 West Daniel Street. I formerly resided in Urbana for about 25 years, just a few blocks from the location of the proposed brew pub. And I just learned about this recently, and it was very interesting to me because recently I published a biography on Joseph Royer, who was involved in the remodeling of this building in about 1902. So I was always very interested in that building. I came across his role in the history of it when I was researching the biography, but I never really followed up on the history of the building until about a year or two ago. I adopted a dog, and I would take long walks in that area when I still lived around, and I walked around that building, and the more I looked at it, the more interested I got. So I researched it, and I actually had an article published in the Preservation and Conservation Association newsletter about the history of the building. And basically, it's a very old building. The foundry that was built there goes back to 1872, so it's got a lot of history to it. In about 1900, initially it was called the Enterprise Foundry, and it was one of the earliest foundries established here in Urbana. About 1902, an individual from Tuscola named Dr. Levitt bought the building and turned it into a worldwide business. They were producing objects for sale around the world, metal objects, cistern lids, things like that. And one of the first things he did when he got the building was he hired Royer, who's a local architect. He did the courthouse here in Urbana and a lot of our historic buildings in Urbana. He hired Royer to remodel it. So basically the two-story part of that structure really shows the hand of Royer's remodel of the building around 1902. And I know the building is a very industrial-looking building. It doesn't have a lot of gingerbread things on it, but if you look closely at it, you can still see a lot of those historic details. So for that reason, I think this would be a really good way to adaptively reuse a historic building that has connections to an important local architect. Relatively recently, another Royer building, this one in Mahomet, dating to 1910, was recently converted into a brew pub, and I think it's really revitalized Main Street in Mahomet. Royer was hired to build a hardware store, grocery store on Main Street in Mahomet, and just a few years ago, it was bought by a local individual who has successfully turned that into a brew pub. So it seems to be a trend that's can have very, very good benefits for the community, and I think with the recent Boneyard improvement project that's gone on and beautified that little section of the Boneyard, this could be a real, you know, win-win situation to establish a building, business like this in a historic building. So I think I would urge you to support this permit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this application? All right. Now, does anyone who would like to speak against the, please come forward. You have to sign in first.
I did.
Oh, all right. Yeah,
My
right
na-
there or back there?
Excuse me?
Did you didn't sign in right there at the table?
Yeah, I did.
Oh.
It's right here. I signed
Oh.
in when I came in.
Okay.
Okay. My name is Dorothy Newman. I live at 301 West Griggs, which is just across the street from this property. I live in a single-family home. And I'm here to ask the Zoning Board of Appeals to defer action on this. I have a lot of questions regarding the kind of licensing, liquor licensing, the class of liquor license that this business would be applying for. And I think that's outside your area of expertise, but I think it's information that you should have before you make a decision on a variance of this. I'll give you some examples of my questions, and I think they really are beyond your scope. First of all, I would like to know what class of license. Originally, I thought it would be a Class B, which is beer only, but then it sounds like maybe they're going to be selling packaged liquor. When they talked about their hours from 4 to 10:30, and then they said, well, maybe 4 to 11:30, I think the constraints on that would be by what kind of liquor license that they applied for. Living across the street, I'd like to know whether they're going to have live music, and if they can change it from maybe 10:30 to maybe 11:30. Maybe they could have it after they started their business. It could be longer. And I'm a member of the Downtown Neighborhood Association, and we're really very interested in knowing exactly legally what their hours would be. We're a little concerned about parking because the Best African food store is going to be open from 4 to 7, so there would be, or from 10 to 7, so there would be an overlap of about 3 hours competing for parking. So we're wondering what that would do to congestion on our street. They said that would seat about 50 people, but we really would like to know what the fire code seating capacity limit would be, which would make a difference in how we would feel about it. Just a block down the street from their location, Canaan Baptist Church has a substance abuse recovery house, and I don't know whether that's terribly compatible with a business like that. We need to know what the difference between a tasting room and a bar is. And I think that would be covered by the kind of liquor license they had. I'm wondering about the smell from brewing. I think anybody who's been here very long remembers Humco and the South Farms. You know, smell can be a real problem. And I'm just kind of curious, are they going to sell packaged liquor in their tasting room? Are they only going to be selling to businesses? A lot of this is very unclear to me and probably unclear to you. So I would request that you defer this until it goes before the Liquor Commission. Thank you.
I have some answers to some of the woman's questions. If and I believe the applicant might be able to answer some of those questions as well. If I have a memo that I'd like to bring up from that was provided to us from legal regarding the liquor license question.
Yes, I suppose that's fine, but the way I understood what was being presented to us is our blessing that you can have this kind of business, but that the rest of the issues would have to be presented to further governmental bodies for their approval. Our voting in favor doesn't mean that it's going to go in, that they would still have to step through these other hoops. Is that correct?
Well, that is true. I was mainly emphasizing the points for consideration for this particular case, although if nearby residents have questions that they would like answered, I certainly, would like to help answer those questions if the question of what kind of liquor license would be provided. And
I don't necessarily object to that, and I'm only the temporary chair, but to me, that's not even really an appropriate issue for this body. I think you are certainly free to answer her questions after the meeting tomorrow in your office, but we are only saying this seems to be reasonable, conditional, compatible use. Therefore, go for it. If we said no, then they wouldn't even have to take, I guess, those other steps or have to refine it. So as I said, while I appreciate her concerns and think they are all valid, I think she should go to another board and raise those objections. And in the interest of time, and we've got other cases that we really can't go down that. We certainly wanted to let her make her record, but we certainly can't go down trying to answer all those questions tonight.
Okay, I do have something I think that is your concern.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is, heretofore, just prior to this, the building was owned and operated by Carl as Carl Printing Services. And currently, there's the African Food Store. And at the end that I guess Mr. Sheehan is proposing, Habitat for Humanity is in there right now. And I don't know what's going to happen to Habitat for Humanity, but it's not really empty now. So I think this is a great deal different from Carl Printing Services. I think it's very different from Habitat for Humanity, and it's very different from the African Food Store. And so I think that is your concern, and to have a bar there is very different from having those three businesses there.
All right. Anyone else wishing to speak against the proposal? We don't have the option of deferring, do we? I mean, it's been requested of us, but I didn't want to just summarily ignore what her request was, but do we even have that option?
I do believe it could be continued to to the next meeting if you decide that's necessary.
If there are reasons that are under the purview of this board that you don't have answered, let's say, if we are unable to provide answers to those questions to you satisfactorily, that would be a reason to continue. It is the applicant's right to bring forward an application. So I would urge you to consider if there are issues that you have that we can perhaps answer today. That would probably be a good course of action.
Based on what has been discussed here, are there now additional questions for staff?
I would just note that as a condition, granting this conditional permit, it does say that they must conform to all applicable regulations of the Illinois Liquor Control Commission. So that would be part of the recommendation and the proposal.
Any other questions for staff? Does the applicant feel the need to respond to anything that was said?
The business is heavily regulated federally and by state. The reason why we choose craft brewery as opposed to brew pub, a brew pub is allowed to sell beer, liquor, wine. They're allowed to sell anybody else's beer. They can make a little bit of their own beer if they choose and still be called a brew pub. A craft brewery can sell only its own produced beer. We can't sell liquor. We can't sell anybody's wine. We can't sell anybody else's beer. What we make, we sell. And we will package it in-house, and we will sell it to our customers. As far as being a bar or a liquor store, that's allowed by right in the B4 zone. What's not allowed for by right is to actually make the beer on premise. And that's all we're asking, is for that condition to be met in this permitting process. So most of the concerns she has really doesn't relate to this process because we're allowed by right. We're allowed by right to be open till 2 a.m. We choose not to. We're allowed by right to sell beer out the door as late as 2 a.m. We choose not to. What we want to do is make beer and sell it. As far as having loud music, that's also by right allowed to us. I don't think we plan on it, but you know, once again, that's not part of this process. So I'd like to just be able to make beer. Thanks.
Could you address the odor issue that she brought up about the smell of the brewery?
I remember South Farms. The beer isn't going to smell like South Farms. Occasionally, you may smell some smells. Chocolate shops, you often smell chocolate. Personally, the smell of chocolate makes me nauseous. You know, so the smells are going to be off-putting to some, and some you may see a long row of people coming straight for us because they like the smell. Most of the effluent from making the beer is just a slightly higher pH than normal, which is easily treatable by the sanitary district. In the application, it mentions 1,500 gallons of water a day. We would use approximately 250 gallons of water a day. We could get higher, but it would be very difficult for us to get to the 1,500 gallons a day, where we would need a special permit from the sanitary district. Most of what we exhaust out will be water vapor, steam, heat. You try not to, let anything else go out.
Anything else? I have one additional question for staff. They have at least one of these type of breweries in Champaign, correct?
Two,
Yeah, Blind Pig and
distill. And there's one in
Right.
Savoy.
Right there in downtown.
Mm-hmm.
You aware of any any complaints from neighboring businesses or other entities to those?
In my communications with Champaign staff over the issue, I don't recall any coming up.
There were none while I worked there, I can tell you that. So.
All right, thank you. Anything further from anybody on staff, on the board for staff or the applicant? All right, then I would entertain a motion.
I'll move. I move that the Zoning Board of Appeals grant the proposed conditional use permit, ZBA case 2015-C-04, for the reasons articulated above and with the following conditions. The use must conform to all applicable zoning and building codes, and 2, the use must conform to all applicable regulations of the Illinois Liquor Control Commission.
It's been moved. Do we have a second to that motion? It's now been seconded. Any further discussion? Then call it for a vote.
Ms. Chester,
Yes.
Ms. Upman,
Yes.
Mr. Warmbrun,
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, the next two items could be grouped together if the board chooses.
I see that now. I wasn't paying attention. Yeah. The next item for hearing, or the next items are cases ZBA 2015 major dash 04 and ZBA case 2015 dash major 05, correct?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Can we please have staff report?
Okay. So this is a request variance by MALA LLC for a major variance to allow a change in the required front yard setback from 15 feet to 5 feet on the Race Street side at the location of 202 West University. It's also a request to allow parking spaces in which exiting vehicles must back out onto a public street at 202 West University. Because currently that is not allowed in the zoning ordinance, so they are asking for a variance to allow such. To go to the subject parcel, it's located at the intersection of University Avenue and Race. See it highlighted there on the northwest portion of that intersection, located along a very busy arterial. Existing currently on the site is a partially vacant building. Towards the rear, there is a hair salon that is in operation. The building has legal nonconformities relating to setbacks because it was built before a lot of elements of the current zoning ordinance were put in place. There is a curb cut onto University Avenue very close to the intersection. And There is also existing parking, which you'll see in the visual, that backs out onto Ray Street, which the application is partially asking to extend. But the applicant has a purchase option for the parcel, and their intention is, if the variances are granted, to tear the building down, to redevelop it in a footprint similar to the existing building, although one that is more compliant, with some requests to continue some of the legal nonconformities because of the restrictions of the site. But the goal is to improve upon the conformity of the site. Just to quickly review the surrounding area, to the north there are single-family homes and area that's zoned R5, medium high density multiple family residential. To the south and to the east, you'll see there's a vacant lot, there's a law office and a parking lot to the east across the street. And to the west is a health clinic owned by Carl. Those are all zoned B3 general business. The future land use designation for the subject property is community business, as are most of the other properties along University Avenue. So the applicant proposes to tear down the building. Towards the front, they would like to install a gaming hall, which was recently made allowable by right in the B3 district. Towards the rear, they would like to establish general office space. To make the property mixed use, it would make the property more compliant on the south end of the parcel facing University Avenue in the diagram that's on the left. It'd make it compliant with the setbacks towards the west side of the parcel. That's the top of the layout right there, as well as towards the east. They're asking to, they're meeting the required parking spaces for that area, which would be 8. They're seeking to provide 11 for the convenience of their clientele and tenants, as well as for compliance with the parking requirements in the B3 district. They would be reducing the rear setback as well as the west setback, as well as worth noting. And that's a rough rendering of what it will look like. So mainly for consideration is the reason as to why the variances are being requested, and what purposes would be served by demolishing the building and replacing it with the proposed use and structures. The proposed building has presented problems in terms of traffic safety for that corridor. That parking that exists on the south end towards University has proved problematic, and this proposal would be eliminating that. It would be complying with a front yard setback for that area. It would be improving the traffic safety by eliminating those parking spaces and that curb cut along University Avenue. I took a picture of an example there of showing a car that is trying to exit onto obviously a very busy street. Given the narrow nature of the lot, is also the reason that the applicants are requesting a variance. To meet the required parking standards would require the preservation of parking along the Ray Street side of the lot as well. The parking on the north portion or on the right side of this diagram would be compliant with what's required in the zoning ordinance as well. And given that the parking situation removes parking spaces on the University Avenue side as well, and it moves pedestrian traffic near that intersection a little farther away, closer to the north, away from where traffic is, the proposed site plan has been given approval from our engineering department as well as our fire safety department. and from staff, because overall it represents an improvement upon the existing nonconformities on the site. So to take into consideration the criteria that are required for major variances, a deviation of more than 25% from the zoning code, or a variance from a policy that the zoning administrator determines to be major because of its significance. In that case, that'd be the requesting for the parking to back out into the right-of-way. But for the criteria, one moment, let me just. Are there special circumstances or special practical difficulties with reference to the parcel concerned in carrying out the strict application of the ordinance? The building and the parcel size were established many years ago before the current code and current setbacks were enacted. The narrow size of the lot and its two front yards, side yards make it restrictive for any new development or any development to meet parking requirements for what's required in the B3 general business district. In order to remove non-conforming spaces on the south end, it would require the allowed continuance of off-street parking along Ray Street, which is the matter at hand with the two requested variances. Next criteria, the proposed variance will not serve as a special privilege because the variance requested is necessary due to special circumstances relating to the land or structure involved or to be used for occupancy thereof, which is not generally applicable to other lands or structures in the same district. As I mentioned earlier, the setback and parking requirements are somewhat prohibitive for any new developments to even potentially improve on the subject property. With the requirements for the B3 district and the layout of the property, it makes 40% of the land area on that property approximately restricted from meeting any sort of parking or development because of the setback requirements. This variance would not create any new circumstances for the property, as the existing east side off-street parking is similar to the proposed site plan. Next criteria, the variance requested was not the result of a situation or condition having been knowingly or deliberately created by the petitioner. The variance requested are not due to a situation that was created by the petitioner. They haven't even purchased the property yet. They merely submitting an application with a option to purchase. The variances and proposed parking would be consistent with the existing conditions, but not only consistent, but an improvement upon that. They would seek to continue one or two legal nonconformities that would remove other ones at the site and would be a great benefit to traffic safety along University Avenue. Fourth, the variance does not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. It's, as I said, it's also generally repeating a few conditions, but still improving others. The variance will not cause a nuisance to the adjacent property. The variance would eliminate parking spaces along University Avenue, and it would allow parking in a similar configuration. There was a letter of protest submitted by residents located in an adjacent parcel who I believe are here tonight. They probably would like a chance to speak. I will address that in a moment. And lastly, the variance ordinance represents generally the minimum deviation from requirements of the zoning ordinance necessary to accommodate the request. Because of the parking requirements for a parcel that's small in that district, the ability to place parking spaces is limited and generally meets, in staff's opinion, about the minimum as could be met for a deviation from the zoning ordinance. So with that said, with major variances, the zoning board of appeals must forward them with 2/3 approval, forward to the city council. They must forward the case to city council with a recommendation to approve with certain terms and conditions that they choose. They may also recommended conditions that they find in it that were in addition to this report. They may deny the variance requests. With that said, the staff recommendation is for approval of the site with the following conditions: that the site is developed in general compliance with the attached site plan, and that the parking and curb cut along University Avenue are eliminated as proposed in the attached site plan. Representatives from the applicant and representatives with his group are also here to answer questions after this as well. The letter of protest was by the resident, whose home was directly to the north of the subject property. Allow me to just pull it out one moment.
From the Bradleys?
Yes. Oh, okay. The resident brought up some concern of driveway access in terms of their parking lot, which is perpendicular to the alley, and their ability to access their driveway or their space with the proposed parking. It's worth noting that the proposed parking to the east would be compliant with what's proposed with zoning ordinance requirements. They also brought up a concern of a utility pole. The utility pole is, I have a picture of it. A little bit is just slightly due south of the parcel line. It also was vetted by our engineering and public works, who did not determine that it would be it would interfere with the movement of parking on or off the site as well. Its relocation is not permissible even because of utilities and requirements. They brought up a concern about access for emergency services. It's worth noting that because the site borders both University Avenue and Ray Street, that the proposed the variances and the proposed plan was vetted from our fire safety and our internal meetings, and was also given approval that there were no concerns on their part about access for emergency vehicles. The residents also brought up concerns about screening between parking lots and residential lots, or screening between a business and a nearby an adjoining use that's residential. According to the zoning ordinance, there's not required screening for parking if the spaces are separated, or if the movement of cars is required to go onto the right-of-way. So in that sense, if you look at the diagram, there is no required screening for spaces 9, 10, and 11. We were just determined that it would be required for space 8 along the eastern part, which the applicant has expressed a willingness to do if required as well. There's no screening requirements for separation of existing parcels with different uses because of their separation of a right-of-way. If they were share a property line, that would be a requirement, but the zoning ordinance does not require that if they're separated by a right-of-way. Another concern brought up by the resident was screening for refuse or for garbage. Or the applicant has indicated that they would agree to create a space in the northeastern portion of the building for screened, for a screened and sectioned off garbage containers or recycling containers as well, that they would simply they would be willing to alter the site plan, and that would also be required when they go through their appropriate building safety permits as well, or at least the establishment of that. And as for the concerns that the residents also brought up about the business hours, the use of video gaming in the south portion, as well as the general office space proposed for the north portion, is permissible by right, and they are they're still required to conform to all applications of city code for hours of operation. So the hours of occupancy wouldn't be very germane to the issue of the variances for parking along Ray Street and for the site back along the front yard portion near Ray Street. So if you have any questions for me. Yes.
How wide is the alley?
The alley is less than 28 feet wide, which is one of the requirements for screening it. I didn't take an exact measurement of it, but
It's less than 28, but you don't know how many it is?
I believe it's at least one car length, so at least 15 to 16 feet. But I don't have an approximate number on me.
It just, when you were showing that picture, it looks very narrow for a car to be able to be, especially if you've got three, I can't really tell how narrow those parking places are, but the narrower the individual spaces, the harder it is to make a turn.
The dimensions of the parking spaces you'll see in the diagram right there, 9 by 6 and then by 20, with the 7-foot setback from the alley, which is compliant within requirements.
Yes, go ahead.
Are the number of how many parking spaces are required for a building this size?
For the use of gaming hall and for professional office space, we determined 8.
And if 8 are required, then why are they asking for 11?
For the convenience and requirements of their tenants as well as patrons for the use to the south of the building. It's a harder space, it's a harder area to provide parking for as it stands because of the restrictions of parking of on-street parking on Ray Street as well as University Avenue.
Other questions for staff? Is the petitioner or anyone who wants to speak on behalf of the requested major variances present?
Good evening. My name is Mark Allen. I'm a principal in the group that is applying for these variances. I would like to make note that the proposed building, while in approximately the same place, is approximately 30% smaller. I met with the Bradleys at the beginning of this meeting and discussed some of the issues that they had raised about our proposed project, and I hope I have allayed some of their concerns. We do feel we need a few more parking spaces than what's required, and normally bodies such as yours are being asked to allow less parking. We would like to have more parking than is required rather than less. We have addressed the screening of the refuse issue. I pointed out to the Bradleys that I think that their diagram is a little bit wrong as far as the location of this pole. The pole is right at the corner of the property line and it is across the sidewalk. So it really does not impact parking space number 8. We are sitting back approximately 4 to 5 feet from the alley with parking space 8 and parking spaces 9, 10, and 11 are set back approximately 7 feet from the property line. The alley is narrow. I do understand their concerns. We do want to make it as easy as possible for them. We do want to be good neighbors. By the same token, the fact that the alley is narrow and it causes difficulty with their approach to their drive doesn't give them a right to use our property as a means of ingress to their parking space. We would like to help them with that, but we do feel we need the parking spaces, and we do feel by enabling this project, the traffic on University Street, the ingress and egress that will be eliminated on University will be of big benefit to the area. So that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Are there any questions for the petitioner? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the petition? All right, well, now we would entertain any testimony from anyone opposed to the request. No? All right. Thank you. Based on the comments of the petitioner, are there any additional questions for staff? Go ahead.
Can I get it one more time, a brief, this parking issue? So you're saying we need 8. Currently, there's no parking in the back, but there's parking in the front. Is that
The-
right? Is that
yeah.
fair to say?
There's parking in the front. There might have been parking in the back at some point. I believe there's stuff preventing parking in the rear as of now, but yes, there's parking in the front and possibly parking in the back, but not being used.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they are currently being utilized as parking spaces.
Okay. I was just basing my observation off of a site visit the other day, but that's what she said is most likely correct.
So really, what we're doing here is we're eliminating the parking on the university side, which has been a very, it's a safety issue for sure. And we're just kind of moving everything else just a little bit to the north then. Would that be fair to say? The parking, the existing parking?
It would be it would be, I guess, an addition of one space to the north, although the footprint of the building and the parking spaces would still be moving slightly southward by about 10 feet.
Okay, thank you.
And just for clarity, is the current single-family home, is the driveway right next to the sidewalk then, where they park their car?
It's set
Sort
back.
of in the front yard?
It's set back. It's perpendicular to the alley, and it's set back somewhat, maybe 10, not too far from the sidewalk. It's most likely yeah, about that, yeah.
This actually gives us more
Ho-
because of
Ma'am,
the building being small.
what you're saying, you're participating in it, but it's not being picked up by the mic, so it's not going to really be part of the record from back there. So I don't have any objection. If you want to make any further comments, you don't have to necessarily be for or against. You can just come up if there are additional comments as an adjoining property owner you'd like to make. No?
I would volunteer if you have questions. I'm just answering your
Okay.
questions because I don't know.
Does anybody have any specific questions of one of the adjoining property owners? No. All right. Are there any additional questions for staff?
In the past, we've handled these one at a time. We still want to do it that way
Oh, in the voting?
in the voting?
I think in the voting we have to, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, with the last major variances that were before the board, I believe it was one at a time, yes. So
Are we ready for a motion? I entertain such.
I'll move that, that we approve ZBA case 2015 major -04 request from MALA LLC for a major variance to allow a change in the required front yard setback from 15 feet to 5 feet at 2002 West University in the B3 General Business Zoning District. And we have to forward this to the city council, right? Right. And that the site is developed with general compliance to the attached site plan, and that the parking space and curb cut along University Avenue are eliminated as proposed in the attached site plan.
We have a motion. Do we have a second to that?
Second.
It's now been moved and seconded as regards ZBA case 2015-major-04. May we have a vote, please?
Ms. Utman,
Yes.
Mr. Warmbrun,
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes. That motion carries and will be forwarded on to the city council for their consideration at what meeting?
let me check one moment.
All right, well, while you're checking, we'll deal with our other piece of business regarding this parcel. Now, in regards to case ZBA, case 2015-major-05, do we have a motion in regards to that case?
I move that we approve ZBA case 2015 major-05, a request by MALA LLC for major variance of section 8-4E of the zoning ordinance to allow parking spaces in which exiting vehicles must back out onto a public street at 2002 West University Avenue in the B3 General Business Zoning District. And I think the conditions, 1, the site is developed into general compliance with the attached site plan, and 2, the parking space and curb cut along University Avenue are eliminated as proposed in the attached site plan, and forward this case to the city council.
All right, we have such a motion in regards to ZBA case 2015-major-05. Is there a second to Mr. Warmbrun's motion?
I'll second.
It's now been moved and seconded. May we have that call for a vote?
Ms. Chester,
Yes.
Ms. Utman,
Yes.
Mr. Warmbrun,
Yes.
Mr. Welch.
Yes. Case ZBA, case 2015-major-05 will now be forwarded on to the city council for their review at the meeting of
June 1st.
June the 1st. Now, we turn our, and this is in combination as well, correct? We now turn our attention to ZBA 2015-major-06. And we call that, and ZBA 2015-minor-01. We now call those cases for hearing. There's a report from staff.
Good evening. The ZBA is considering 2 cases. case, 2015 Major 06 is a request for a major variance by the Urbana Park District to construct a monument sign that will be 2 feet taller than the maximum allowable height of 6 feet in the CRE district at 505 West Stoughton Street, which is the Phillips Recreation Center. The second case is 2015-minor-01, and that is a request by the Park District for a minor variance to construct a monument sign that will encroach 2 feet into the required 8-foot setback in the CRE district at the Phillips Recreation Center. Now, both of these cases apply to the same proposed sign. And just a quick review of the Phillips Recreation Center. Exhibit A, we see it here. It is surrounded by quite a mix of land uses. There are commercial and residential uses to the south, with residential uses to the north, east, and west. Now, Exhibit B illustrates the zoning, and it's also included in the memo. And to the north and west, we have residential zoning, while to the south and east, we have business or B2 zoning. And on the future land use map, which is Exhibit C, we see that the site is slotted for a campus mixed use. Now, just some background information. Moving to Exhibit F here, which is the site photos at the end of the memo. Scroll all the way, there we go. So as can be seen in these two pictures, the Phillips Recreation Center has a sign along Springfield Avenue. That sign is, the sign, or a sign, has been present in that location since 1996. This existing sign is located roughly halfway down the block. It's double-sided, and it's internally illuminated. It is set back 4 feet from the public right-of-way, which is a 50% variance from the allowed setback, and is 6 feet 11 inches tall, which is a 15% variance from the allowed height. The Park District has found that due to the curvature of Springfield Avenue and the presence of parking along the north side of Springfield Avenue, the existing sign is not highly visible to passing motorists traveling along Springfield Avenue. And it's not included in the memo, but I do have a picture kind of just to illustrate that point for you. So here we can just see the curvature of Springfield Avenue. We're looking east down Springfield Avenue, and the sign is tucked over here to the left, and visibility is limited due to the parking along the north side of the street. Just returning back to the memo. The Park District proposes to replace this existing sign with a new sign, as seen in the renderings in Exhibit D. So here is a rendering that was provided by the applicant that shows the new sign as proposed, and then the second image here is the more schematic drawing of that proposed sign. I'll just leave that there for now. The sign would be set back 6 feet from the public right-of-way, and it would be 8 feet tall. This new sign will only be 2 feet short of the required 8-foot setback, and it would reduce the existing nonconformity of the sign setback from 50% to 25%. The new height of the sign would represent a 33% variance from the allowed height of 6 feet. And then towards the beginning of the memo, we have a table that just compares the dimensions and the design of the existing sign to the proposed sign. The sign is not the sign will have a electronic messaging board that will take up less than 50% of the sign face, and its upper portion would be internally illuminated. On November 17th, 2014, the City Council approved Ordinance 2014-11-106, which allows for digital signs in the CRE district and which applies all established sign regulations to these signs. The sign is not expected to have a negative impact on the surrounding area, as it will be located in roughly the same mid-block position as the existing sign, and it will reduce the nonconformity in terms of sign setback. The sign will continue to project east and west, and it will not project into the residences or commercial spaces located to the south of the recreation center. The sign will be utilized to promote the Park District events and programs. The Park District finds that the new sign will enhance wayfinding along Springfield Avenue, as well as improve visibility for its programming. Now, turning to the criteria for a variance. 1, are there any special circumstances or special practical difficulties with reference to the parcel concerned in carrying out the strict application of the ordinance? The curvature of Springfield Avenue, along with the presence of on-street parking along the north side of Springfield, impedes the visibility of the existing sign. Proposed sign will enhance visibility and is in closer conformance with current sign setback regulations. 2, the proposed variance will not serve as a special privilege. As noted, the proposed sign will enhance the visibility for the Park District's programming. The unique placement of the Phillips Recreation Center along Springfield Avenue provides an important opportunity for the Park District to promote itself and enhance wayfinding. 3, the variance requested was not the result of a situation knowingly created by the petitioner. The Park District has maintained the Phillips Recreation Center since 1996, and during that time has not modified the site significantly or its bordering public right-of-ways to require the need for this new sign. 4, the variance will not alter the character of the neighborhood. The new sign will replace a double-sided illuminated sign. The new sign will be set back an additional 2 feet from the public right-of-way and will continue to project east and west, similar to the existing sign. 5, the variance will not cause a nuisance. By being oriented to the east and west and located roughly halfway along the block, the proposed sign will not create a nuisance for the residences or offices located the south, west, or east of the recreation center. And 6, the variance represents generally the minimum deviation from requirements that is necessary. The proposed sign is only designed to the extent that it will ensure improved visibility for the Urbana Park District's programs and events. As we know, minor variances may be approved by a majority vote of the ZBA. To be approved, a major variance requires a recommendation of approval by 2/3 of the ZBA's members before being sent to City Council for final consideration. In case 2015 Major 06, or the request for a sign that is 8 feet tall, the ZBA has the following options. The ZBA may forward this case to council with a recommendation to approve the variance as requested. B, it may forward this case to council with recommendation to approve the variance along with certain terms and conditions. If the ZBA elects to recommend conditions, I ask that you articulate those conditions. And C, the ZBA may deny the variance request. If the ZBA does so, I ask that you articulate why. In this case, staff recommends the ZBA recommend approval of the sign as proposed. Meanwhile, in case ZBA 2015 minor 01, or the case allowing a 6-foot setback for the sign, the ZBA has the following options. You could approve the variance as requested. You may approve the variance along with certain terms and conditions. If the ZBA elects to add conditions, I ask that you articulate those conditions. And C, the ZBA may deny the variance request. If the ZBA does so, I ask that you articulate why. And again, in this case, staff recommends approval by the ZBA for the sign as proposed.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Is the petitioner here or anyone to speak in behalf of the variances? Please come forward. Sure. You both need to sign in.
My name is Caitlin Lill. I am the project manager for the Urbana Park District, and this is Derek Liebert, Superintendent of Planning and Operations for the Urbana Park District. We wanted to, first of all, I really want to thank staff and especially Max for all of the help that they've given us over the last couple of weeks putting this together. I'll keep this short. The Phillips Recreation Center is really our base for the business operations of the Urbana Park District. It's where we sell pool passes. It's where people register for programs that happen throughout Urbana. And it's where people know to go for those things. We believe that with the slight impediments that Max described of the curvature of the road and the parking on the north side of Springfield, that the sign really does need a little bit more visibility and a little bit more elevation. So we hope that you'll consider that tonight.
I might add that this is an instance of the Park District being responsive to our citizens. We have a citizen advisory committee that's advised us that that sign is not doing justice. They have advised that we look at both an electronic sign and one that's more visible, and so this is us being responsive to our citizens.
Any questions for the petitioners? Any additional questions for staff in response to what the petitioner said? Okay, thank you. Then we've concluded these hearings. These motions, since one is a major and one is a minor, they would need to be made separately. So now we'll entertain motion regarding ZBA case 2015-major-06.
I move that the zoning board of appeals approve ZBA case 2015 major-06 and forward it on to the city council. It allows a sign that is 8 feet tall.
It's been so moved. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It's now been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call that for a vote.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Chester?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Warmbrun?
Yes.
Ms. Oakman?
Yes.
That motion carries, and ZBA case 2015-major-06 will now be forwarded on to the city council for their review at their meeting of June the 1st. All right, and now as order of business, is there, I call ZBA case 2015-minor-01. Is there a motion in regards to that case?
I'll move that case ZBA 2015 minor-01 that Urbana, that we approve the Urbana Park District's request for a minor variance for a sign that is set back 6 feet from the public right-of-way along West Springfield Avenue.
It's been motioned. Is there a second to that motion?
Yes.
It's now been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we call that motion for a vote.
Ms. Chester?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Warmbrun?
Yes.
Ms. Oakman?
Yes.
That motion carries and is approved. Thank you. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Seeing that we have no one left in the audience, there's no audience participation. Is there a staff report?
Just a brief update on a case that you've heard recently. We are looking into it more thoroughly, but it appears as though you may need to rehear the case of 703 West High Street because a majority of the quorum is needed to take action on the case. That was not the case when it was heard, so stay tuned.
All right. Is there a study session? And I believe we are adjourned.